Hello gamers, welcome to Video Games in the World. My name is John and today is the full episode of the History of Mortal Kombat. This was changed into an episode due to a lot of issues that had to be dealt with and I wasn't working much on it as a special. So I decided to remake it into an episode. So we know that the game is 26 years old and it's still going strong. So in honor of the possible MK11 teaser, this is episode 14 of Video Games in the World. Mortal Kombat is a fighting game about a group of fighters in a tournament that would decide the fate of the world. While the game is very popular, at the same time since the first game's release, it has sparked so much controversy due to extreme graphic violence and gore, which led to the creation of the Electronic Software Rating Board due to the government's attempt to interfere with the gaming industry. The game series spawned numerous sequels, toys, 2 live-action movies, live-action shows, and even a cartoon series as well. And even after more than 26 years, the series is still very popular as much as other fighting games like Street Fighter, Tekken, Dead or Alive, and many more. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to dive into the world of Mortal Kombat by exploring its origins, games, and plots of the game. Enjoy. Mortal Kombat began development in 1991 with Ed Boon, John Tobias, John Vogel, and Dan Forden. In 2009, Ed Boon said that the development of the original game consisted only of 4 guys at the time. Boon was in charge of the programming. Tobias and Vogel dealt with the graphics, and Forden dealt with the sound, and literally, that was the entire team. Originally, Boon and Tobias were approached to create a game based on the 1992 Universal Soldier film, where a digitized version of Jean-Claude Van Damme was fighting villains. The inspiration behind the game to be hard-edged and realistic came from movies such as Enter the Dragon and Bloodsport. The characters in the game look more realistic compared to the cartoon looks of Street Fighter. Boon and Tobias continued their project even after the deal of using Bloodsport fell through. Ironically, though, the character of Johnny Cage was a spoof based on Van Damme himself. John Tobias has said that his inspiration for this game derived from Chinese mythology and some of the stories rumoring the events about the Shaolin monks. What Americanized Tobias' obsession with supernatural kung fu movies was a 1980s movie, Big Trouble in Little China, although it was not his biggest influence. What really influenced Tobias was movies such as the Sui Hark films, Sioux Warriors, and The Swordsman, which Tobias and Boon had to get from bootleggers in Chicago's Chinatown. Tobias' writing and artistic input on the series ended in 1997. 15 years later, he said, "I knew exactly what I was going to do with a future story. A few years ago, I wrote a sort of a sequel to the first MK film and an advancement to the game's mythological roots. The goal was not to run away from what came before with a retelling, but to move the themes forward. I did it for fun, as an exercise in screenwriting, but it felt good to get that out of my system." Ed Boon recalled that for 6 out of the 8 months while they were in production of the original Mortal Kombat, nobody could come up with a name nobody didn't hate. Some of the names suggested included Kumite, Dragon Attack, Deathblow, and just Fatality. Someone had written down Combat on the drawing board for the names in Boon's office, and then someone wrote a K over C according to Boon, just to be kind of weird. Steve Ritchie, a pinball designer at the time, was sitting in Boon's office and saw the word Combat and said to Boon, "Why don't you just name it Mortal Kombat?" And that name just stuck. Since then, the series uses the letter K in place of a C for various words containing the hard C sound. According to Boon, during the MK games development, they usually spell the words correctly and only correct it when one of the developers points out that they should do it. The characters of the original Mortal Kombat and its initial sequels were created using digitized sprites, mostly based on film actors, as opposed to drawn graphics. Early Mortal Kombat games were known for their extensive use of palette swap, a practice of recoloring certain sprites to appear as different characters which was used for the ninja characters. In fact, many of the most popular characters have originated as simple palette swaps. In the very first game, the male ninja fighters were essentially the same character, only the colors of their attire, fighting stance, and special techniques indicated the difference. Later games added other ninjas based on the same model, as well as several female ninja color swap characters, initially also using just one base model, beginning with Kitana in Mortal Kombat 2. All of them gradually became very different characters in the following installments of the series. Mortal Kombat 4 brought the series into 3D, replacing the digitized fighters of previous games with polygon models. The team switched from digitized actors to motion capture technology. The first Mortal Kombat game was published and developed by Midway, Acclaim, and Sculpture Software. The game was released in the summer of 1992 on the arcade and also on various consoles and handhelds. Since its release, the game has become a worldwide phenomenon, also competing against Street Fighter at the time. Also, this is the game that led to the creation of the ESRB. The story takes place in a tournament called Mortal Kombat. Millions of years ago, various realms were created by the Elder Gods. To keep these worlds in check, the Elder Gods enacted a sacred tournament called Mortal Kombat to even the odds and give other realms a chance to defend themselves. Whichever realm won 10 consecutive tournaments, then that realm would merge with the other and invade it. Now, on Earthrealm, Outworld has won 9 consecutive tournaments, and this 10th tournament will decide the world's fate. The Thunder God Raiden recruits 3 special warriors to fight these evil forces. Liu Kang, a monk who enters the tournament to represent the White Lotus Society. Johnny Cage, an actor who is sick and tired of being bashed by the movie critics, enters the tournament to prove that he is the real deal. And Sonya Blade, a special forces soldier hunting a vicious murderer called Kano. A specter from the Netherrealm called Scorpion, once a ninja of the Shiraryu clan, enters the tournament to kill his deadliest enemy, Sub-Zero, a member of Scorpion's rival clan, the Lin Kuei. Players can choose one of 7 fighters. They can perform melee and special attacks against their opponents. When opponents are too weak to fight at the end of the second or third round, they have a short time to finish them off with a fatality. Mortal Kombat is played from 1 to 2 players. Players can play against a computer or against a friend or family member. When beating the game, the characters have their respective endings, whether they are good or evil. The game tells a story of not only the game but also the characters. In this game, players can block and attack. When playing solo, players must fight against various opponents, which the first part includes a mirror match. While fighting, players are given the chance to test their might by breaking wood, iron, and diamond items, giving them a much higher score. After the mirror match, they must fight in endurance battles, which means fighting against 2 different characters. When one is beaten, the other one shows up and must be defeated before the player himself is defeated, or if time runs out. After the 3 endurance matches, they face off against a 4-armed Shokan Prince, Goro. After Goro is defeated, they face off against Shang Tsung himself. The differences between the arcade and the Super NES versions is this. The violence in the arcade was kept, such as Johnny Cage's fatality uppercut and Sub-Zero's spine-rip fatality. The Super NES violence was greatly toned down, in which blood was replaced by saliva or phlegm. And Johnny Cage and Sub-Zero's fatalities were heavily edited. This game is the first of many controversial video games at the time. Most parents and officials were appalled by the high level of violence that the game had, like characters bleeding with each hit and losing a lot of blood after a fatality was performed. Hearings on video game violence and the corruption of society, headed by Senator Joseph Lieberman and Herb Kohl, were held in late 1992 to 1993. The result of the hearings was that the entertainment software industry was given 1 year to form a working rating system, or the federal government will intervene and create its own system. Eventually, the Entertainment Software Rating Board was conceived, requiring all video games to be rated and for these ratings to be placed on the game's packaging. Mortal Kombat 2 is the second installment in the series that was published and developed by Midway for the arcades. For the consoles, it was published by Acclaim Entertainment and developed by Sculptured Software. This second chapter in the series is considered to be the best by most fans. Unlike the predecessor on the Super NES, the violence was not edited, but still, it was highly controversial due to its bloody content. Electronic Gaming Monthly considered it as the bloodiest video game of 1994. The story takes place shortly after Mortal Kombat 1. Outworld was undefeated in 9 consecutive tournaments, but that streak had ended in the tournament that took place in the Earth Realm, the 10th after 9 Outworld victories, in which Liu Kang defeated Shang Tsung and Goro. Facing execution for his failure, Shang Tsung begged the Emperor of Outworld, Shao Kahn, to grant him a second chance. With his youth restored, he lures the Earthrealm warriors in an Outworld tournament where they are to face and meet certain death by Kahn himself. This tournament is far more challenging and Kahn has a home advantage. Failure to stop him means the end of the world as we know it. Mortal Kombat 2 had major improvements since the first game. It featured crouch punch, which is weaker than uppercuts. Roundhouse kicks were more powerful, sending the opponent flying across the screen. There are also tricks to harm opponents such as Baraka's claws, Kitana's fan, and so on. The returning new characters have enhanced tricks as well. New characters that were introduced were Jax, Kitana, Melina, Baraka, Kung Lao, and Reptile. New characters as well are introduced, although they are not playable. Smoke, Jade, and Noob Saibot, but they will be playable in future games. It also introduced characters performing not 1, but 2 new fatalities, and even new ones involving friendship, where characters play pranks on opponents instead of killing them. Babality, which the opponents are turned into a pretty little baby. Oh, you little baby. And stage-specific fatalities, where instead of just uppercutting, players need to use some certain moves on the controller to perform these stage fatalities, sending them to their deaths into the abyss below, a pool of acid, or the spikes in the ceiling. Players can choose 1 of 9 opponents introduced for new characters and the recurring ones of the first game. They can play 1 in a top from the first opponent up until Shao Kahn, or play for 2 against a friend or a family member. The theme and art style of MK2 have a dark tone, although with a more vibrant color palette employed and a much richer color depth than the previous game. The game also strays strongly from the Oriental theme of the first game, though it does retain some of its original motive in aspects, as in the music of the game. The game's nature became less serious because of the addition of trivial and joke alternative finishing moves. Mortal Kombat 3 is a fighting game and the third installment in the series developed and published by Midway Entertainment. Other companies that develop and publish a game for consoles were Williams Entertainment, Acclaim, Sony, and GT Interactive. The game was released in 1995 and it was a major hit, but fans were disappointed that Johnny Cage, Raiden, Kitana, Melina, Reptile, and Scorpion were not included. All of that was fixed in the releases of Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 and Mortal Kombat Trilogy, which are updated and improved versions of MK3. It is actually one of the best Mortal Kombat games of the 90s, but still, Mortal Kombat 2 to many fans is the best. After a defeat in the second tournament, Shao Kahn enacts a 10,000-year-old plan. His plan is to revive Queen Sindel and then conquer Earthrealm. He succeeds when his Dark Priests revive her on Earthrealm. And so, the portal to Outworld starts to link to Earthrealm, causing all the people to die and their souls to be taken by Shao Kahn himself. Only a few souls are spared. Those of the warriors who fought in the first 2 tournaments of Mortal Kombat and others who would join them as well. Except that Johnny Cage was caught by Shao Kahn's right-hand centaur, General Motaro, and died in battle. Now, the remaining warriors, along with the reigning champion Liu Kang, must save the Earth before Shao Kahn begins his conquest. Like its predecessors, this is a fighting game in which you can play for 1 or 2, either against the computer, a family member, or your friends. The game featured new characters such as Cabal, a former criminal, Curtis Stryker, a police officer, Shiva, a female Shokan warrior, Nightwolf, a shaman, Sindel, the former Edenian queen, and Cyber Linkway assassins Sector and Cyrax. Smoke returns, only that he is a cyborg and not a ninja like in the first 2 games. The game introduced newer fatalities and also a new one, the animality. It is when a character turns into a respective wild or prehistoric animal in which they kill opponents by clawing, biting, mauling, devouring, decapitating, goring, and so on. Not to mention that friendships and babalities have returned. In Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, playable characters are Jade, Noob Saibot, Ermac, and Rain, and returning ones are Kitana, Melina, Scorpion, and including the classic Sub-Zero, who was killed in the first Mortal Kombat and then returned to life as Noob Saibot. He is also the younger brother of the older brother of the younger Sub-Zero. Mortal Kombat 3 is a fighting game, and players can choose 1 out of 15 playable characters and then choose their destiny, such as Novice, Warrior, and Master. This also includes characters to sprint and perform combos for some major damage. These have a limit, however, with a green fatigue bar below the health bar. In Mortal Kombat Trilogy, there's their aggressor, which makes the effects of their hits stronger. They can change difficulties from very easy to very hard like in previous titles. Through cheat codes, they can play as Smoke, Motaro, and Shao Kahn himself. Noob Saibot can be unlocked as an NPC through the Ultimate Combat codes. Characters are rendered in 2D sprites, and this time they look more realistic than in the first 2 games. Also, the stages look even more grim and dark since it takes place in Earthrealm, invaded by Shao Kahn. Stage fatalities are more disturbing as well, such as an uppercut through the next train track, the spikes below, or the spike wheels below the pit 3, which is scarier than the first 2. Mortal Kombat 4 is the 4th installment in the franchise, and the last game to be on the arcades. It was released in 1997, developed by Eurocom, and published by Midway Games. This was also updated as Mortal Kombat Gold for the Sega Dreamcast, which the story overrides that of MK4's. This game is the first game to be introduced to 3D, and from then on, every single Mortal Kombat game will be rendered in 3D graphics. Mortal Kombat 4 featured new characters, gameplay, graphics, and a new villain and storyline. Also, the game has some elements from Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero. In this game, players can also drop the weapons of every fighter. Thousands of years ago, during a war against the fallen Elder God Shinnok and the Thunder God Raiden was responsible for the death of an entire civilization, in this case, Saurians. To avoid such mistake to be repeated, Raiden banished Shinnok into the Netherrealm. Now, Quan Chi has allied himself with the fallen Elder God and rescues him from his confines. With the help of an Edenian traitor called Tanya, they kill most of the gods. Knowing the threat that they pose, Fujin and Raiden gathered Earth's greatest fighters to fight against the evil trio. With 3D games becoming popular, Midway decided to make Mortal Kombat 4 a 3D game. Ed Boon also wanted the game to be 2D with 3D elements. Players can choose to play as one of 15 characters and can choose to battle friends and family or against the computer. There are new characters such as Reiko, Jarek, Fujin, Kai, Tanya, Shinnok, and Quan Chi. In the Dreamcast game, Mortal Kombat Gold, more characters are featured: Kitana, Melina, Cyrax, Kung Lao, and Baraka, while others such as Noob Saibot and Meat are secret, playable, or unlockable characters. The fighters can draw weapons like swords, spears, and so on, and there are also new fatalities and stage fatalities as well. Stage fatalities are awesome because they are thrown into a fan, the blood splatters into the screen, and the head bounces into it as well, which was a great addition. In the arcade mode, players can choose any character they wish to choose and battle in 4 different combat levels such as Novice, Warrior, Master, and Master 2, which is a lot more fun with almost every fighter and a lot more challenging as well. After beating Shinnok, each character has his, her own ending depending if they are good or evil. Developers decided to make the game into 3D, with 3D games becoming increasingly popular at the time. Ed Boon, however, he wanted to mix 2D with 3D when the game was being made. This is the first MK game to feature computer-generated characters. An example of 3D fighting games is games like Virtua Fighter and Fighters Megamix, not to mention Tekken and Dead or Alive. The game used complex animation, and some critics were disappointed with the game that they did not like any other 3D fighting games at the time. The Game Boy version was completely in 2D, but it was a watered-down version and it was not very good. Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance is a fighting video game developed and published by Midway for the Xbox. Now, this Xbox is not compatible with the 360 or the Xbox One. It's the one that came out in the early 2000s. It was also for the PlayStation 2, the GameCube, and the Game Boy Advance. It was the first all-new Mortal Kombat fighting game produced exclusively for home consoles with no preceding arcade release. This is chronologically the 5th main game in the Mortal Kombat series. There are 2 different Game Boy Advance games based on Deadly Alliance that were released. The first version, with the same title, was released in 2002, during the same week as the home console versions, while the second Game Boy Advance version, Tournament Edition, was released in 2003. Many years have passed since the events of Mortal Kombat 4. At that time, Kitana united the Shokan and Centaurians and the Adenians to fight against the forces of Outworld and to finally defeat Shao Kahn. During this conflict, Shang Tsung and Quan Chi joined forces with one another, forming the Deadly Alliance. They plan to revive the undead army belonging to the previous Outworld ruler, the Dragon King Onaga. Their first task to do so is to eliminate their 2 main threats, Shao Kahn and Liu Kang, and they succeed in eliminating both of them. Goro, however, who was killed in combat during the war against Outworld, was revived by Shao Kahn and pledged loyalty to him once more. This Shao Kahn who revived Goro was the real one, since the one killed by the Deadly Alliance was only a copy. Raiden was furious that the Elder Gods didn't do anything to help Liu Kang, so he renounces his status as an Elder God to reunite the good guys once more and fight the Deadly Alliance. The gameplay is completely different from that of previous entries in the franchise. Each character now possesses 3 individual fighting styles, generally 2 hand-to-hand styles, and 1 weapon style, with the exception of Blaze and Mocap. Players can switch between these styles with a push of a button. In previous games, aside from dial-up combos, all the characters fought virtually identically, with only special moves to differentiate them. The number of special moves per character has also been reduced, varying only from 2 to 4 for most, thus forcing the player to make use of the improved fighting system. Characters can no longer run, and there is no run meter. However, while still limited to only moving into the background and foreground, movement in the 3rd dimension is much easier and can be used continuously. To prevent fighters from leaving the arena, boundaries that are otherwise invisible appear when a fighter is knocked against the edge. Character models became more realistic. Flesh will move or jiggle on a character as he or she moves around. Environmental interaction is present, but infrequent. Several levels include obstacles such as pillars or statues that can be shattered to damage an opponent standing near one. There is just one fatality per character, while the previous games include many ways to finish the opponent. Along with Mortal Kombat X, it is the only other Mortal Kombat game that does not include stage fatalities, although the Acid Bath level still possesses special acid vomiting statues called Acid Buddhas that do damage directly to fighters that stray too close to them. New characters introduced into this game are Blaze, Boraicho, Draman, Frost, Zuhao, Kenshi, Lime, Mavado, Mocap, Malak, and Natara. As for the returning characters, you know the rest, except for Liu Kang, because in the intro to this game, he is killed by the Deadly Alliance. Despite the success of the fourth game, the series had begun to suffer from overexposure by the late 90s, while spawning mostly failed or mediocre projects such as the animated series Defenders of the Realm, that lasted only one season, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, which underperformed in theaters. The live-action series Mortal Kombat Conquest lasted for only one season, despite the strong ratings. On the game front, the side-scrolling Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero was met with limited interest, as was a Dreamcast port of Mortal Kombat 4 titled Mortal Kombat Gold. Among critics, both games were considered mediocre at best and received less than favorable reviews. But another game that was heavily blasted was Mortal Kombat Special Forces, an adventure game like Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero and Shaolin Monks. Mortal Kombat Deception is a fighting game developed and published by Midway as the sixth installment of the franchise. It was released for the PS2 and the Xbox on October 2004, and for the Nintendo GameCube in March 2005. Mortal Kombat Deception follows the storyline from the fifth installment, Deadly Alliance. There are 26 characters that are available to play, with 9 making their debut in this game. Deception contains several new features in the series, such as chess and puzzle games with MK characters and an online mode. Mortal Kombat Deception was the very first game to feature online mode. The Conquest mode returns from Deadly Alliance, but follows the life of Shujenko, a warrior who is deceived by Onaga to search for artifacts to give Onaga more powers. In November 2006, Midway released Mortal Kombat Unchained, a port for the PSP, which adds characters to the game from the previous title. The co-creator of the series, Ed Boon, designed Deception to be an unpredictable fighting game, and included new features such as the mini-games as surprises. Several parts from Deadly Alliance, such as combos and arenas, were redesigned to be more realistic as well as more interactive. Deception has been well received by video game reviewers who praise the fights and the new features. Conquest Mode received criticism for poor voice acting. Several publications have called Deception the best fighting game of 2004. The intro of this game revealed in the story that Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance was the first game where villains were the victor in the story rather than the good guys. In the final moments of Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, most of the warriors who fought against the Deadly Alliance were killed, some were captured, and others were stuck in Outworld. Raiden was the last one to fight against Shang Tsung and Quan Chi. Although Raiden was getting the upper hand, Tsung absorbed from the Soulnado and defeated the Thunder God. Untrusting of each other, the Deadly Alliance broke and the Sorcerer and Necromancer turned on one another. And that's when the Dragon King Onaga had finally appeared. Raiden had no choice but to join with the Deadly Alliance. But the Dragon King was too powerful even if Raiden self-destructed, killing himself and the Deadly Alliance. In the story explored in Conquest Mode, a young man named Shujenko is deceived into spending his life collecting the Kamidogu for Onaga, who uses the guise of an emissary of the Elder Gods named Damashi. This is prior to Onaga's resurrection in the body of Reptile. He only revealed his identity and intentions after Shujenko has gathered all the Kamidogu. Shujenko, led to believe he was working for the greater good, joins with the others opposing Onaga. Most know the gameplay mechanics since Deadly Alliance and previous games. However, This game introduced another massive new roster of characters: Ashra, Dairo, Darius, Havoc, Hotaru, Cobra, Kira, Shujenko, and Onaga. Liu Kang returns as a playable character in this game, and in this one, he's a zombie on a rampage revived by the corrupted Raiden. Because actually in this one, Raiden becomes a bad guy. The game also introduces a combo breaker, a system which allows players to interrupt combos up to 3 times per match. In contrast to Deadly Alliance, in which characters had only 1 fatality, the Deception characters have 2 fatalities and a Harakiri suicide move. The latter is used when the phrase, "finish him or her," is shown on the screen and the player is about to lose. This game introduces 2 mini-games: chess combat, similar to classical chess, but uses player-selected characters as pieces that must best each other in combat to take a square. Some pieces have certain abilities, ranging from impersonating their opponents to instantly killing one of the opposing pieces. It also adds puzzle combat, a puzzle game similar to Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, which features super deformed versions of the MK characters that attack each other once a player gains an advantage in the game. The Crypt returns from Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance and serves as an interface to access extra content in hidden coffins. In Deception, the size of Crypt was reduced from 676 coffins to 400. Some of these also have locks that require keys which can only be found in Conquest mode. The Crypt in Mortal Kombat Deception includes 12 bonus characters, which was cut down to 6 characters in the GameCube version. Mortal Kombat Armageddon is the 7th main video game in the Mortal Kombat fighting game series. The PS2 and Xbox versions were released on October 2006, with a Wii version released in May 29, 10 years ago in North America. The Xbox version was not released in PAL territories. Chronologically, the final chapter in the original Mortal Kombat storyline. It features every character from previous games. Players select one of them and battle a selection of the other fighters to determine the fate of the universe in Mortal Kombat. The gameplay retains many of the same elements from the previous titles, including characters, multiple fighting styles, etc. Instead of the pre-scripted fatalities of the previous games, players can now create their own fatality from a series of gory attacks. They can also design a custom character using the Create a Fighter mode. The game also includes the story-based Conquest mode from Deception, now casting the player as the warrior Taven, who must defeat his evil brother, Dagon. Succeeding his predecessor, Puzzle Combat is a new mini-game called Motor Combat, a cartoonish driving game influenced by Mario Kart. The game was well received for the large number of playable characters and the Conquest mode, but it was still criticized for use of the same engine from the previous 2 games, as well as similar play styles between characters. Reaction to the game's custom fatality feature was also mixed. Nevertheless, Armageddon was recognized as one of the best games of 2006. Ages of Mortal Kombat have begun to tear the fabric of all the realms. The fighters have grown too powerful and numerous. To prevent this, the Elder Gods demanded a safeguard to be put in place to absorb the combatants' insatiable bloodlust. In an enormous crater in Edenia, these warriors clash in an ultimate battle between the forces of light and darkness that would threaten to rip apart reality and bring about the apocalypse. Without warning, a mysterious pyramid rose from the ground, and the tip burst into flames, attracting the warriors' curiosity to see what it was. The combatants fought one another to get to the top, while Blaze, the god's fire spawn, revealed himself to them. This fire spawn was created by Delia, a powerful Edenian sorceress who's the mother of Taven, to destroy each fighter that threatened him in order to save the realms from Armageddon. This will be the warriors' last battle, in which some will survive and others will die. This will be the final battle for Mortal Kombat, the battle that will determine the fate of all the realms. Armageddon is the final game of the original timeline in the series. It contains every single fighter in the series from the previous installments of the series and their upgraded versions, not counting spin-off adventure games like Special Forces and Shaolin Monks. However, the 8th game is actually a spin-off, Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe. Therefore, the story of the game is non-canon, but still it has some of the elements from previous titles. Mortal Kombat 9 was developed by NetherRealm Studios and published by Warner Brothers. Originally released on April 19, 2011, and then almost a year after its release, the complete edition was released on both the PS Vita and the PlayStation 3. Mortal Kombat was well received by fans and critics shortly after its release, which sold over millions of copies and featured new graphics, new worlds, as well as the classic old ones of the classic Mortal Kombat games. This game also has various DLCs as well, such as Kenshi, Cyber Sub-Zero, Scarlet, and everyone's favorite nightmare boogeyman, Freddy Krueger. Not to mention that the PlayStation 3 edition came with Kratos of the God of War franchise. Following the events of Mortal Kombat Armageddon, the forces of good and evil have all been wiped out. Only Raiden remains, but is defeated by Shao Kahn. Just as Kahn is about to deliver the final blow, Raiden sends a message to his earlier self saying he must win. Then we flash back to the events of Mortal Kombat 1, where Raiden experiences a premonition from a cracked amulet and must now change the course of events that will come into fruition. This is a 2D fighting game with 3D graphics. Principal gameplay involves a one-on-one fighting in a single 2D fighting plane at 60 frames per second, although characters are rendered in 3D. Characters from the MK trilogy return, as well as those from MK Armageddon, including a new guest character, Kratos from the God of War series. Kratos is only in on the PS3 version, but a lot of people were hoping that for the Xbox 360 version they would have at least Marcus Phoenix from Gears of War, as it was rumored. But unfortunately, that never came to happen. Players can unleash special attacks and make them stronger while filling the super meter. When the super meter is filled, characters unleash X-ray attacks for some major damage. There are new types of gameplay modes such as arcade, ladder tag, story mode, challenge tower, and so on. Players in tag mode can choose a partner and play against a CPU or against friends and family. Also, MK9 includes online versus, where players could fight other players. Challenge Tower is where players complete in 300 different challenges of varied difficulties. With the points they earn in winning matches, players head to the crib to purchase new upgrades for characters and many other cool things. Players can choose to fight in arcade, arcade ladder tag, or in story mode. Story mode is actually a retelling of the 3 classic games in the series. Players in story mode play as all the good guys who fight against the evil forces of Outworld led by Emperor Shao Kahn, who is aided by Shang Tsung and Quan Chi. The game's design was unique in merging 2D with 3D rendered characters. Mortal Kombat runs a heavily modified version of the Unreal Engine 3, similar to the engine used by its predecessor, Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe. The new Mortal Kombat game increased not only in characters but in different arenas and speed. Dan Forden returns once again as a lead sound designer. He was known for being such in the classic games. Music themes such as the Screaming Forest, the subway, and so on have been rearranged and are more epic than before. Sound effects such as punches and kicks landing on opponents are better than ever, and voice acting is way better than the one it had in Mortal Kombat 4. When Mortal Kombat was released, characters from the classic MK trilogy were in, and also added new DLCs. Scarlet, a red female character based on the rumor of MK2. Kenshi, who was first introduced in Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. Rain, first seen in Mortal Ultimate MK3. And from the Nightmare on Elm Street series, Freddy Krueger. Mortal Kombat X was announced in 2014 and then released in April of 2015. This game is a sequel to the Mortal Kombat reboot and was developed by NetherRealm Studios and published by WB Interactive. The game was released for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. NetherRealm Studios' mobile team developed a version for iOS and Android devices. A version for the 360 and PS3 was in development, but was eventually cancelled because NetherRealm could not get the 7th generation of consoles versions to the quality of an expected Mortal Kombat game. High Voltage Studios developed the PC version of the game, with Polish studio Q-Log taking over the work on it shortly after the release of Kombat Pack 1. Like previous games, Mortal Kombat X's gameplay consists of 2 players, or 1 player and a CPU, fighting against each other with their selected character using a large, varied array of character-specific attacks. The game contains several modes such as Story Mode, which takes place 20 years after the previous Mortal Kombat game, several Tower Modes which feature dynamically challenging challenges, and numerous online modes and a crypt, a mode played in a first-person perspective where players explore the areas unlocking a variety of in-game items. The gameplay remains the same with the X rates and fatalities. However, the brutality makes a comeback since the Mortal Kombat trilogy, and this time it's not combo themed in nature but also performing a move when the opponent's meter is on the verge of being depleted. There are also classic fatalities such as Sonya's Kiss of Death, Kano's Heart Rip, Jax's Arm Rip, and many more in which after defeating their opponents they take their classic winning poses. And the best part is that Sonya, Kano, Liu Kang, Jax, Kitana, Mileena, Sub-Zero, Reptile, Scorpion, and Ermac, and Kung Lao have their classic outfits from previous titles of the franchise. In Mortal Kombat X's online gaming there is the quitality, in which when a player quits, his or her character will die. Like in NetherRealm's previous installment, Injustice Gods Among Us, players are able to interact with environmental items and walls within the area. Each fighter has 3 variations such as Scorpion's Ninjutsu, Cassie Cage's Hollywood, and Mileena's Ethereal. In the game's expanded version, Mortal Kombat XL, stage fatalities were brought back and even the classic pit. DLC characters in the game were Tanya, Triborg, Boraicho, Tremor, Jason Voorhees, Leatherface, Predator, Goro, and Alien. New characters introduced to this game are Cassie Cage, daughter of Johnny Cage and Sonya Blade, Jackie Briggs, Jax's daughter, Takeda, son of Kenshi, Kung Jin, Kung Lao's younger cousin and also the very first gay character of the series, Kotal Khan, the new ruler of Outworld, Devora, a humanoid who commands a swarm of insects, Farah and Tor, a savage symbiote, and Aaron Black, a gun-wielding warrior living in Outworld. 2 years have passed since the defeat of Shao Kahn. As punishment, the Elder Gods destroyed him for violating the rules of Mortal Kombat. Many of the warriors have died and became revenants. Johnny Cage, Sonya Blade, Kenshi, Raiden, and Fujin head to the Sky Temple and prevent Shinnok from contaminating the Jinsei, which is the life force of Earthrealm. Johnny Cage defeats the fallen Elder God, and then they head after Quan Chi, in which Johnny nearly dies. Raiden uses his powers to prevent Johnny's turning into a Revenant, and by merging his power with Quan Chi's magic, an explosion occurs in which Jax, Scorpion, and Sub-Zero revive and become human again. 20 years have passed and a new generation of fighters has arrived. Cassie Cage, Jackie Briggs, Takahashi Takeda, and Kun Jin. Meanwhile, there is a civil war brewing in Outworld and our heroes must stop Mileena and return the amulet to Raiden. But things do not go so well as the return of Shinnok is imminent. Mortal Kombat X spawned a comic book series which bridges the gap between the events of Mortal Kombat 9 and Mortal Kombat X. It also won the Best Fighting Game of the 2015 at the Game Awards. Well-known voice actors in this game are Ashley Birch, known for her web series Hey Ash, What You Playing, and Johnny Young Bosch, a well-known voice actor and known as Adam in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. There were other Mortal Kombat games that were not in the fighting genre but in the adventure genre. The first example is Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero, in which Bihan, the Elder Sub-Zero, is the only playable character and tells a story before the events of Mortal Kombat. This game is a platforming adventure game with some RPG elements like earning EXP in order to learn its moves such as the Ice Blast, the Slide, the Ice Clone, and many more. This title was for the N64 and the Sony PlayStation. The only difference is that the PlayStation version had live-action FMVs with horrendous acting, while the N64 only had scenes with written dialogue. It wasn't well received by critics and fans of the series. However, it still remains a cult classic among some fans that like the game. Another blasted game that was adventure themed was Mortal Kombat Special Forces, which was another prequel to the series. This game stars Jax, who is hunting down Kano and his criminal organization known as the Black Dragon. Another adventure-themed MK game was Shaolin Monks, in which Liu Kang and Kung Lao are the main protagonists. This game bridges the gap between Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 and was released for the PS2 and Xbox. Unlike Mythologies and Special Forces, this game was well received as it had a better storyline and gameplay. The seventh title in the franchise is Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe, in which players will play not only as MK characters, but their favorite heroes and villains from the DC Comics universe. While we have seen comic books, toys, spin-offs, and prequels, Mortal Kombat was also in other media. On April 11, 1995, several months before the release of the first live-action movie based on the series, there was a short animated movie titled Mortal Kombat: The Journey Begins. It features traditional animation, motion capture, and CGI to explain the origins behind some of the movie's main characters, as well as a 15-minute behind-the-scenes documentary of the theatrical release. Trailers of the film was seen on the promotional screener VHS copy and on other VHS releases from Turner Home Entertainment and New Line Home Video. The film was included on the Mortal Kombat Blu-ray released on April 2011. The plot follows Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, and Sonya Blade, also the three main characters in the live-action movie, traveling on a mysterious boat en route to the Mortal Kombat tournament. On the way, they meet Raiden, who provides them with hints on how to survive the tournament and defeat Shang Tsung and his army of Tarkatan minions. Upon arriving on the island where the battles take place, Raiden retells the origins of Shang Tsung, Goro, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, and the Great Kung Lao in between fight scenes. The first movie was released on August 18, 1995. It was directed by Paul W. Sanderson, known for directing and writing the Resident Evil movie series. The first movie closely followed the story of the first two games, except with some differences in a certain way. Liu Kang heads to the tournament to avenge the death of his brother Chang, who was killed by Shang Tsung. Johnny Cage goes to the tournament after being given a scroll by Master Boyd, who was Shang Tsung in disguise. Sonya Blade was hunting Kano and boarded a ship that was headed to Shang Tsung's island against Jax's advice. Raiden mentors the three fighters and guides them in the tournament. The producers did an amazing job in making this film, not to mention how wise of them it was to base it off the first two games, and some lines from the game were in the movie. Best fight scenes in the movie were Scorpion vs. Johnny Cage, Liu Kang vs. Reptile, and the final battle against Shang Tsung as well. Most of the filming locations were in Thailand and California. In terms of the actors, Brandon Lee was cast as Johnny Cage. Unfortunately, his death during filming of The Crow didn't give him a chance. Jean-Claude Van Damme was approached to play Johnny Cage, but he turned it down due to playing as Guile in Street Fighter. So the role went to Lyndon Ashby. Robin Shaw as Liu Kang, Bridget Wilson played as Sonya, Karihiroyuki Tagawa played as Shang Tsung, and later who reprised his role in Mortal Kombat Legacy Season 2. Christopher Lambert played as Raiden, the late Trevor Goddard played as Kano, and Puerto Rican actress Talisa Soto played as Kitana. A sequel was released in 1997, titled Mortal Kombat Annihilation. This sequel is largely an adaptation of Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. Unlike the first movie, this one was completely blasted due to extremely horrible acting and a lot of other things that failed to live up to the spirit of the previous movie. Mortal Kombat had an animated series titled Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm, which was kid-friendly in nature compared to the dark, twisted, and gritty world that is a game series. It only lasted one season. There was also a live-action series in 1998 titled Mortal Kombat Conquest. This series focused on the story of the Great Kung Lao, but only lasted one season despite having lots of viewers. In 2011, Mortal Kombat had a web series titled Mortal Kombat Legacy, years after the success of the short film, Mortal Kombat Rebirth. This series was very successful and lived up to the spirit of the franchise in its own unique way. It has 2 seasons and a third one is still in development, but so far, there have been no latest news about it. And that's pretty much it for the history of the Mortal Kombat franchise, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to give a shout out to History Behind the Warrior for giving me the inspiration with his clips on the histories of the characters of the series. Thanks, man. You're awesome. Now, I really like this series not only because of all these awesome finishers and fighting styles, but also on how the story becomes better with each game. Although there were some games I did not like, there are so many that are good. My personal favorite game of the series is Mortal Kombat 2. If you really enjoyed watching this, then comment, rate, subscribe, and share with everyone that you know. This is John, host of Video Games in the World. Play hard, gamers, and have a good one. Bye-bye.